Tonight on Bog Panda, we're going to talk about Mr. Bones. And he's called Mr. Bones because he's not a doctor. Is that like anyone else we know?
And not just any episode of Bog Panda, but it's our annual Halloween spectacular lead in to the even more spectacular Halloween spectacular.
Bog Panda.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bog Panda. I am Kelly at KELLYTHUL on Twitter and Instagram.
Asserting my soda dominance. I am Dr. Mike, at Official Pagan on everything. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, leave a comment, come back, leave another comment, find an old video, watch it, leave another comment, start another YouTube page so you can subscribe again. Do it all while you're wearing some of our merch. Soda Cuck.
And there's like a new thing on YouTube, according to the algorithm, apparently, which we want to caress the algorithm. We can't do a t-shirt about that, but that's what we want to do. Apparently now there's this thing called binging, and that's like a good thing for a channel. If someone watches a video after a video after a video, and you want to be cool, and apparently cool people binge, and what could be more cool than to binge Blog Panda? So just do what Mike says: jump from video to video to video, leave us a comment, leave a trail of your binge so that we can follow it and see where you went. That'd be awesome. I don't think anyone's gonna do that. It never hurt to ask, right?
True.
So maybe a quick one. We'll have to see. We're going to talk about a pretty awesome Sega Saturn game, which it seems fits in perfect with our celebration of Halloween, as we've been putting out different shows on games that relate to it, all building up towards the super special, spectacular Halloween show. Fingers crossed. So we'll see how that goes. But Mr. Bones, I had not been really familiar with it. Came across it because there's likely a Halloween related article where they were talking about different things, games with kind of cool pieces to it. And so I had not been familiar, dug into it a little bit more, and this is looks like one awesome game. What were you familiar with it before? I know you have a little bit of Sega expertise in your background. Were you familiar with it before, or any thoughts?
No, so actually I wasn't familiar with this prior to you sending me some information. So I was a huge Sega Genesis guy, and then of course 32X Defender till the day I die. You can pry my 32X Doom from my cold dead hands. Saturn not so much though, and 32X and Saturn debacle is really what kind of brought down Sega ultimately, and why the Dreamcast didn't really get the lifespan that it should have following those. So not as familiar with Saturn.
Yeah, I mean, from all intents, me either. But as you kind of go through and see some of the backlog of games and the quality of it, it looked like a pretty sound system. Looks like it had some good stuff going on with it. It is unfortunate that Sega couldn't kind of get behind one and kind of drive out a good that generation console back. I mean, they were doing better than Atari in terms of some of the swings that Atari was taking during this time, but it was really self-inflicted because they're the ones that kind of paralleled up the Genesis and the Saturn and kind of set them against each other, which is unfortunate. But Mr. Bones is pretty cool. Now, I am, because I'm fiscally responsible, I didn't buy the gold-plated Super Console X that Mike did, and so the number of games that I have is smaller. I don't know if you've had a chance. Do you have a Sega Saturn section on your?
I don't. There is no Sega Saturn on the one that I have.
Oh goodness, we'll have to see. We'll have to dig around to find a legal ROM to kind of get deeper experience with Mr. Bones. But I've had a chance to kind of read up on it and watch a lot of the gameplay that's available on YouTube. We'll include a gameplay link so you can get a good look at it. But it looks like I said a pretty fun game. Met with mixed reviews in terms of some folks because there is such a distinct difference between each of the levels and the style of play. A lot of it's platformer ish, but either different angles or different things kind of going on, or some games that are closer to memory game or breakout or these types of things. So that you have a kind of a good variety of gameplay in it, and a fascinating story of a evil philosopher magician guy who likes to play the magic drums to convert skeletons to be evil, but one skeleton is not evil. And you can tell because that skeleton has blue eyes versus the red eyes in all the other skeletons. And you play as that skeleton in various things. So I thought the concept was good, and the idea of level changes that were not just a reskinning or further complexity of the same kind of gameplay, but actual significant differences. Do you have kind of a preference when you're going through a stage gated game like that? Do you want to kind of keep the same basic premise of gameplay, or are you more open to this kind of variety?
I'm kind of open to it. The only time that I feel like that sort of thing backfires, because personally, I do like variety in games. I did always try. I never had like a gigantic game library for any system. Like, and by that I mean I had a good amount of games for every console that I had, but I had friends who had, were diehard collectors and would have nearly every game, had hundreds of actual physical cartridges for every console that they had. So I didn't go that deep into it at times, but I, had most of the 32X games because of the lifespan of the system. But with a lot of them, I would have 50, 60 games, and I would try and keep them somewhat diverse. Like I'm really into fighting games, as we've covered on this before, but I didn't just buy every fighting game that came out. I tried to mix it up because I like switching back and forth and doing different things. Where it backfires sometimes when you get that within the same game, I'll go with like Batman 89, for example. The platforming stages on that are great until you get to the driving stages, which are awesome. And that's the thing that everybody talks about, to the degree that when the Sega CD version of it came out, they just from fan badgering had to give you an option to only play the driving stages as one of the options on there. So it can become problematic to me when something outweighs the other stuff. A better example and a really extreme example would be the Lawnmower Man video game. Did you ever play that?
I did not.
So have you ever seen the movie Lawnmower Man?
Yes, it's been a while, but I've seen it.
So the movie's kind of, for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's famous for a few different things. It is silly and laughable now, the special effects, but it was a gigantic leap forward for CGI at the time. And part of that was because the movie used footage. This is a tie into another thing we did. This is why I'm going off on this tangent. It ties into Thomas Dolby. Thomas Dolby was one of the first artists to do a video album. In fact, it was a video only album initially. He did eventually release just the audio portion of it, but years later. It was called Beyond the Mind's Eye, and it's actually his most successful solo record. Everybody thinks of the album with She Blinded Me with Science on there because that was a big hit song. There's no specific breakout hit on it, but Beyond the Mind's Eye was his most successful solo record because it had that visual component to it, and it was all very early CGI stuff. They took a lot of that and used it as the basis for the effects sequences in Lawnmower Man, which is based on a Stephen King story. It incorporates 2 or 3 lines of dialogue so they could put Stephen King's name on there. He wasn't fond of that, so a big lawsuit ensued, and he eventually got them to remove his name from it, which is mostly why it's famous today. The video game adaptations, though, at the time were extremely popular. Now are kind of hated. You'll find them on worst games list, but it's a great example of that. There is side-scrolling platforming stages that are awful, just absolutely terrible, mind-numbing slogs to get through, to get to these really cool CGI that represent the CGI segments of the movie. Those stages are super fun, but you have to trudge through these terrible, poorly slapped together stages to get there. They couldn't make it all the CGI stages because even looking back on it now, if you hop on your Super Console X, go under the Sega or Super Nintendo one, it is very clear that those games, those stages are pushing those consoles to the absolute maximum of what they could possibly do at that time. As far as the speed that they're moving at, the amount of colors, pseudo 3D polygon graphics, and things like that, stuff that those systems shouldn't have been able to do. So they padded it out with these terrible slap together levels. So sometimes with games like that, that becomes problematic to me because you get that's the only good thing about it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think, and I'd be interested to kind of, oh, I bet you it's about at the same time. So Dolby doing what he did was very cool. And really kind of at that time, Peter Gabriel was another person that was kind of heavy into bringing video and multimedia type experiences to where there'd be actually kind of CD based stuff you could do on your computer that were kind of is tied to Peter Gabriel and had elements of Peter Gabriel's music, but it was more of an experience kind of thing. And of course, his, which were kind of more practical effects and early kind of CGI and video manipulation, both Sledgehammer and then Steam were videos that for the time were really kind of out there and pushing stuff. But I recently played those two for someone of a younger generation. And they were wholly unimpressed with we've come a long way in terms of what you can do. And largely Steam, if you ever watch the video for Steam, it's largely someone who discovered the kind of pinch and stretch functionality of a video processor. And that's most of Steam, which at the time was amazing to watch.
Right.
Now maybe shows its age a little bit.
Yeah, I mean the Beyond the Mind's Eye video doesn't hold up today, but I remember when it came out and how like mind-blowing that was to people. I remember people lined up at Sam Goody to buy this, not even because they knew who Thomas Dolby was or cared, but just this video had such a reputation of being such amazing visuals, and they would play it in music stores and stuff on all the monitors in there. It was an extremely popular video, and it went double platinum. Again, his by far best-selling solo record, even though there's no hit songs off of it. And when I say that it inspired Lawnmower Man, I don't just mean they were inspired by it. They actually took footage from it and put it in there, and then hired the animators who worked on that to expand on their segments that they had worked on to literally turn them into the CGI sequences in Lawnmower Man. So it is literally expanded versions of clips from that album.
And Mike and I have been discussing all this music stuff because of its clear tie back to our topic for today, Mr. Bones. Because speaking of music, the music for Mr. Bones was put together by a certain Mr. Ronnie Montrose. And so this was another kind of trend a little bit at the time, was to occasionally pull in a legitimate musical artist to have a significant role in the music for the game. And so Ronnie Montrose on Mr. Bones is worth the price of admission in terms of that stuff, because it's Ronnie Montrose. What I was unaware and kind of doing some of this digging is that this was a pretty popular thing. Care to guess the artist that was involved with the music for Spyro the Dragon?
I don't know.
Stuart Copeland.
Really?
Police, yes. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, so I was
but I do remember what you're talking about, though, where that was kind of a thing for a while, having known music artists contribute video game music, not just the typical video game composers that we were used to at that time.
Yeah. 9 Inch Nails on Quake, probably one of the best examples.
Yeah, 9 Inch Nails on Quake. That's probably the most famous. Another one that always pops to mind for me is Guar with the Beavis and Butthead game.
Well,
and they worked them into the
Beavis
game.
And Butthead.
Yeah, they worked that into a part of the story. So the story of the Beavis and Butthead video game is that they got tickets to go and see Guar and lost the tickets. So you have to go and find the tickets and make it to the concert. So you get Guar music peppered throughout.
That's another one I'm not familiar with. I'm gonna have to try it out. So we'll have to see.
It's a decent game.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool. Excellent. So find a way to check out Mr. Bones, or at least check out Mr. Bones gameplay on YouTube, because it looks really cool. Dust off your Sega Saturn if that's the way to go. and we'll see how that goes from there. But it was just a fun one. Seemed like a good fit for Halloween. Looks like a great game, and it gave us an excuse to talk about a few other things.
As we are wont to do.
That's right.